Today, my guest is sculptor Zenos Frudakis, who designed the Honor Guard bronze sculpture at the Air Force Memorial in Arlington, Virginia. The Air Force Memorial is the newest in the D.C. area. Now, Zenos is an academician of the National Academy of Design in New York and a fellow of the National Sculpture Society. He has created over 100 larger-than-life and portrait busts for public and private collections, including, among others, General Douglas MacArthur for the MacArthur Memorial Foundation and the Pentagon, and General George C. Marshall Foundation, Virginia Military Institute in Lexington, Virginia. Zenos holds a master's and bachelor's of fine art from the University of Pennsylvania and attended Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia by scholarship. He served on the board of directors of the National Sculpture Society for 6 years and on the editorial board of Sculpture Review for 3 years. He was invited to participate in the third Rodin Grand Prize exhibition at Hakone Open Air Museum, where he received the Hakone Award. The Japanese press called him the American Rodin. Zenos, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline. It's wonderful to be on your show.
Thank you very much. Let's start out, Zenos, by, first of all, describing briefly, because we'll get into some more details, the Air Force Honor Guard statue and its relationship to the Air Force Memorial itself, which is a large, gorgeous, spired memorial.
Yes. Well, when I was called by the Air Force to work on this project, that was before there were spires being planned. There was going to be actually a building there that was for educational purposes. And the sculpture of the Honor Guard, as you know, the Honor Guard is the guard that's there for special events, and it has two figures with flags in the center, American flag and the Air Force flag with the banners, streamers, and the two figures on either side holding rifles on their shoulders. And
yes, and it greets the visitors as you come in. The Honor Guard sculpture is standing there, and it's so impressive. It's so realistic that you immediately feel that it is the Honor Guard, and they're absolutely incredible. What artists have inspired you in your work, Zenos?
Augustus St. Gaudens, his Shaw Memorial, the sculpture many people will remember that inspired the movie Glory. That's in Boston, Massachusetts. It's the Robert the Guild Shaw Memorial, where you see a figure on a horse that was killed in battle from the Civil War, he led an entirely African American group of soldiers, and that was inspiring because for a couple of reasons, for the concept and also the skill of the sculptor had in making it. I think he's the greatest American sculptor to my mind.
Yes, and I do want to tell the listeners that there is a book that's been produced called the United States Air Force Memorial Honor Guard, a sculpture by Zenos Frudakis. It's filled with wonderful photographs of the Honor Guard, and there is a picture also of the work that you are referring to, featuring Shaw, and the book was compiled and written by Rosalie Frudakis. But it's a wonderful edition, and as I understand it, people can purchase this book also through the Air Force Association, the Air Force Memorial.
I think on Amazon.
And I'm sure on Amazon, yes. So, but it is a lovely book.
What's interesting about it, I think it does explain the whole process, which is how a sculpture is made from beginning to end technically in terms of sculpting it and casting it.
Yes.
And it's not just the way I did this particular statue, but it's universally how most bronze statues are made. And when you see them in a city, you'll know when you're looking at the sculpture how it was made. That it wasn't created.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Full grown. Yes.
What I was about to say was that Bowling Air Force Base is the home of the Air Force Honor Guard, which you visited to learn about the Honor Guard and to use models for your work. And how did your being there physically and seeing the men and women that are training as honor guard and seeing actual honor guards affect the development of the sculpture?
Pete Lindquist, who was a retired colonel, who was the person I worked with the Air Force in creating this project, took me to the base so I can see the cream of the honor guard. These are the ones that are used by the President of the United States and for the most important events. And I got to see these wonderful young people who look great in their uniforms, and I got to see their work ethic, and they work so hard at what they do, and how they they just dress impeccably, and I watched them march, and I took many photographs of them and interviewed them, and I drew from them when I did my sculpture. Originally the sculpture was going to be more general than it turned out to be. It evolved, as often sculptures do. Originally it was going to be a very sketchy-looking piece, almost impressionistic, one that where you'd be hard-pressed to see a portrait of a particular person or a particular even gender or race. It was going to be very, very general. And as we developed the piece, we realized that the honor guard nearly always is represented by both genders, and is multiracial, and so we wanted to get that element in the sculpture. So we made it more specific, and I actually had several young women who posed for the female, and people. I had a Hispanic person pose for one of the figures, and an African American, a couple African Americans posed for the African American figure, and several people posed for the Caucasian. So it represents all of the diverse airmen as it does in real life.
Yes. And while we're talking about that and the relationship to the spires of the memorial itself, there are three spires.
Yes.
And they're located at the highest point in Arlington National Cemetery, and the tallest spire is 270 feet in the air. That marks the location of this memorial, and it's designed to resemble the bomb burst maneuver of the Thunderbird demonstration. And here, standing there, is the honor guard. Now, how tall are the figures?
Well, the figures are 8 feet tall each, and then the flags are another additional 8 feet, so the two center figures are 16 feet. And I worked with Jim Freed, who was the architect for that project, and originally, that, as I said, that was going to be a building, and I always thought that they should have something taller, and actually suggested stainless spiral elements, and they created this particular piece from it once they decided to move away from the building, once the Air Force decided they didn't want a building. Originally it was going to be at another location near the Marine Memorial, and the Marines didn't want it that close to their own memorial for some reason.
Yes,
there was some controversy. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yes, I do. And actually, I'm going to be interviewing Colonel Boyne next week about it, and he's going to go into the history of all of that. And of course, it's appropriate that we're doing it at this time because it is the Air Force, the birthday of the Air Force. So it's appropriate that we are talking about all of this. And since you brought up the early, the start of the concept, I mean, it was years and years in the making.
Yes. It was going to be a star-shaped building, I believe, at one point. And,
right.
Once they moved to the higher ground, then they were allowed to have a higher structure, and that's when I also had been suggesting to Pete Lindquist and Ed Grillo, who was running the project, that I thought it would be great to have something tall and stainless, and so that's what the direction they went.
Well, it's very impressive, and I visited the area last week for the Air Force celebration, and driving in or flying in, you see it from all over. Yeah. So it's a wonderful, wonderful look, but also when you visit it in person, as I say, and you enter, and there's the honor guard to greet you. It's so impressive. Let's talk a little bit about now. Okay, when you came into it, as you said, originally your concept was a little more general and a little more generic. How did it develop then from that point? Talk a little bit about your early process and what your early thoughts were.
Well, I think at one point, too, there was talk of there being real flags. And I told them that I thought that that would make the sculptures of the uniformed men, of the uniformed airmen, which includes the women, into a kind of very fancy flag holder. So I said I thought the flag should be part of the sculpture, and it was tricky to sculpt it that way with the flagpole as thin as it is, and there were some problems there, but they understood that would be a better solution.
Yeah.
And also, as I say, moved them away from the sketchiness of the figures because I did think that it should represent the diverse group of airmen that are in the Air Force.
Sure.
As the Honor Guard does.
But before you came to, excuse me for interrupting, but I think it's important to mention the fact that you didn't start out this way with the idea of the Honor Guard, because there were a lot of people involved in designing this memorial, and there was a lot of discussion, and also your early designs. I remember seeing pictures of some of your early designs, and they were low to the ground. And
well, Jacqueline, I think you're referring to the relief. They were what's called bas relief, and bas meaning it's a low relief, or mezzo relief, which is a middle relief. And at one point, when the idea was first brought to me, the idea was for it to be a sculpture in relief and with a heavy stone behind it, and anchoring it to a stone. And I felt like the figure should be freestanding, and I made an argument for it, and I made several models to show them, because sometimes people need to see it. I can visualize what they're going to look like at the completion of a sculpture. I've done so many of these, and sometimes people can't visualize it that well. But once they saw the small models, and that's why you do small models, which are called maquettes, they're several inches high. I showed them how the freestanding sculpture I thought would be more interesting than a heavy stone with a bronze relief on it, and they realized that was a better solution, so that's what we ended up doing. And we went through a couple of, there were many small models that I did before we decided on this particular.
Well, yes, and as an artist, you had to deal with several people on several committees that had their own ideas, and doing. I think it's important for listeners to understand too that anytime an artist is doing a piece of artwork that's a public piece of artwork, there's a lot of parameters, but certainly doing something in the D.C. area had to have been in itself just filled with parameters that you had to adhere to.
Yes, there's within the group, you have strong personalities and people who are accomplished and of course they have strong opinions, and you have to be knowledgeable enough and have the kind of authority that your knowledge gives you, that people can see why it's best to do what you're suggesting. And also you have the politics of Washington, D.C., and we had a little bit of that.
And I want to ask you, how did the precise stance and movement of the Honor Guard affect your representation? I know you spent a lot of time and a lot of taking photographs and watching them.
Yes. Well, as I said, originally it was going to be a very sketchy piece, and the Air Force started bringing a woman who actually makes their uniforms, who is she was their tailor, to my studio to see what I was doing, and they also they brought people who review the Honor Guard and the actual Honor Guard. So they began to look at the sculpture as if it was the Honor Guard.
Yes, yes.
And so they started to criticize it in the way they would the actual Honor Guard. And when the real Honor Guard, if there's a little thread hanging off, they'll burn it off. if it's hanging off the coat, or they everything is so precise. They measure everything with almost a micrometer. It's just extremely precise in the actual living honor guard. And they started to do that with the sculpture, which it just increasingly as the weeks passed, and this went on for about 5 years.
For how long? How long did it go on?
I think it was about 5 years from beginning to end. But I think a couple of years in the large size. I actually did a 9-foot model that I began at one point of the figures, and then they felt it was a little too large, so I started over again and did it 8 feet. But most large sculptures like this, traditionally, you make what's called a maquette, which is a small conceptual model where it's very sketchy and you're just developing your idea. And once you get the okay, then you move into what's called a third scale model, and which I did was a sort of a size in between, and then you move into the big one. You don't go from the small model right to the large one.
Yes.
You're sort of developing problems, and you're solving problems in these various stages. Because by the time you get to the large one, this piece was 16 feet high when it was with the flags, you have to have a very sturdy armature, and you're past the time when you should be making major changes.
Mm-hmm.
You have to develop that in a smaller model. So when you see large sculptures out in public squares, and that's generally how they were done. In this case, I had to have the right stripes, the right the metals. They had to be in the right place. I mean, and again, it had to be perfectly. I mean, there was the person who was in charge of the honor guard looked at it and said to me, "It's perfect." At the end, said everything is exactly where it should be.
Absolutely.
And that's satisfying. Although for art, usually you think that you can be a lot more flexible, but this was something besides art. It was. And also, talking about the streamers were very complicated to do.
And there's a wonderful photograph of that in the book as well. The battle streamers in clay look so, well, like streamers.
Yes,
and of course, you're an artist, but it's amazing to me.
It was difficult. I mean, there are challenges here, and making all those streamers and to pull them out so that you could see the various important battles. And some I think more significant than others, and even though they're together in a certain, I think it was in chronological, but there's certain order. Some of the important ones had to show up over some of the others, so I had to pull the streamers out. And anyway, it was a very interesting process.
Well, yes, and and I agree with that. For this art piece, it was more than an art piece, and it did have to be perfect, and it was perfect and is perfect. And that's the other thing that is so impressive, that even though they are these 8 feet tall figures, they are real people standing there.
Well, I wanted to have a sense of life, and to have a sense so that they weren't just mannequins, and they weren't. I mean, there are real people posed for them, and a couple of them are very close to the people that act, specific people, and a couple of the others are a little more generalized.
Yes.
And they also I put a blue patina on the sculpture, which is very unusual, instead of a brown patina because of the blue uniforms of the Air Force. It's kind of a blue-black patina. It's kind of hard to make it too blue.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought that was unusual as well.
Yes. Now, when was the decision made to make the flags part of the sculpture? As you said, you didn't want it to look like an exotic flag holder. How did that, and when in what part of the process did that come about?
That was still part of the small model stage, the model stage. And I could show them, the committee, at that size, I think they were about 12 inches high, that it looked better with the actual flags, and they saw that. And it was easier to make the argument when I could make the argument so visual for them.
Yes. Well, of course, I think most of us would have difficulties visualizing an artistic concept. Now, how difficult is it to go from clay models, and you made clay models, 8-foot clay models, of course, which is part of the process. But how tough is it to go from clay models to the bronze fabrication? And could you describe briefly how that all works? Because that is an amazing process to me.
Sure, and this isn't something that I do directly. I have a bronze foundry. Of
course.
This is what sculptors do generally. They have they're fortunate. And I have a great bronze foundry that I've been using for about 25 years. This one is in Chester, Pennsylvania. It's called Loran Bronze, and they actually also cast the World War II memorial for another sculptor. And they have the experience, and they worked very closely with me on it. And what happens is you have the clay models, and they come in and they make rubber molds on the clay models in my studio.
Mm-hmm.
I think they took some of it away to the foundry and made the molds there. Then they take the rubber away from the clay, and then the clay pieces basically can be trashed after that because you've got the rubber mold.
Well, and they're made, aren't they? Like, for instance, they don't make a rubber mold of the full body. They make a mold maybe of the head or the torso. Is that how it works? And then
they made a rubber mold, I think, of the whole of all of it.
They did.
The guns, yes, all of it. And I mean, it's a lot of pieces. I forgot how many there were. There might have been 17 or 18 mold pieces for each figure.
Yes, I'm looking at one now of the torso.
Yes. And the flags are extremely complicated, especially the one with the battle streamers. And they once they've made the rubber mold, then they pour hot wax into the mold, into the rubber, and then take the rubber away. And then I have an exact replica of the clay sculpture, but I have it in wax.
Mm.
And then I take the wax and I work the wax. And I had a couple of very good assistants that worked with me. I had three who worked with me on the different stages. And at the bronze foundry, I went in there and I worked on the waxes, and then when the waxes were finished, they took the different parts and they dipped it in a ceramic material, a liquid material that hardened over the wax. And so that when they heated up the whole thing, the wax would pour out and leave a hollow space where it was in this ceramic shell. They call it ceramic shell. And then we could pour the bronze in. It's called lost wax process because you lose your wax.
An ancient, very old process.
It's ancient. It hasn't really changed that much.
Yes.
And then when it cools off, they knock away the ceramic material, and it's almost like a kind of a birthing process or something, or like an eggshell that's being broken off, and you see the sculpture come through. And then when all the pieces have the shell broken away off of it, and you have the bronze, and it's raw bronze, you have to weld it together, the different parts, and you always lose a little bit between the casting. You have to fix the little pinholes, the different things that didn't cast properly. You have to fix that, and went over the whole piece and heated it up with a torch and put acids on it to get the blue color.
Well, but before you did that, before you actually started on the patina, the sculptures had to be reviewed.
Oh yes, they were reviewed at every stage.
Yes.
And even after the patina, I had to actually talk them into the blue patina because I think at one point the architect, Jim Freed, thought he would prefer the brown, and I told him I thought the blue would be a little bit more appropriate in this case, not just because the Air Force uniform is blue, but also because there was kind of a gray color from the stone in at the site. And I thought the blue would go a little better with and the stainless. It would go better with the stainless spires than brown would, than a warm brown, which is more traditional looking.
So here you are going through this process, and each part of the process is being reviewed by General Grillo. Now, who was General Grillo?
Yes, he was in charge of the project.
And Pete Lindquist was involved, and several of the honor guard specialists came in also to check along the way. The thing that was interesting to me too was the fact that Major General Grillo viewed the sculptures and actually assisted the men in the foundry by helping them verbally, telling them how to correctly align the folds on the flags. I mean, that's amazing to me, this whole process.
Yes. And everybody, contributed. It was great that way, and I think there was a lot of good feeling in the project, and of course I'm honored to have done it, and to have one of the military, what would you call it? It's one of the service memorials. The Marines have theirs, and the Navy has theirs. The Marine one, of course, is the Iwo Jima Memorial, and the Navy has one in Washington D.C. That's the Navy Memorial, and this is the Air Force Memorial. So I'm very,
which took a long time before the the memorial actually came together. Well, I can certainly understand why you would be so proud to do this. This is something that decades, centuries, maybe even if we're that lucky from now, people will be talking about you like they talk about the artist who did the Shaw piece.
Memorial. Well, there's also, I didn't mention, there's stainless inside the bronze. That helps. Many times, hollow bronze sculptures, if they need the reinforcement, they have stainless inside them to help with the structure. And so there's very heavy stainless pieces that come out of the bottom of each sculpture. So they can't just be pushed over. Or if there's a heavy storm, sculptures have to be able to withstand, I think it's 100-mile-per-hour winds. Mm-hmm. And it certainly can do that.
Well, and the welding process was interesting, too, because they had to make sure in fabricating this that the pieces, there were parts of the sculpture that had to be welded together, and they had to make sure that all of the seams and everything were ground away. And
well, they have to be invisible.
Yes.
You can't really see any seam lines, and of course I was there for all of that and supervised it and worked on it.
Of course.
And I think with some of the Rodin sculptures, for example, since many of them have been cast after he died, they leave some of the seams because they want to show that the art, they weren't over cleaned, that they weren't over.
Yes.
Someone else's hand hasn't taken away some of the modeling of the sculptor by grinding it. Or since I was there, of course, I can make sure that I did, that the seams were invisible.
And
we also, at the end, had to wax the sculpture. We don't want to forget about that. And they're waxed, and they actually have a kind of acrylic. There's a covering that helps protect it from the elements, and also a wax on top of that.
Very quickly, Zenos, how long did the process take of the bronze fabrication? Can you give me some idea of what period of time?
Generally, it takes about four months to do something like that, but I think this took considerably longer, and I'm trying to remember how long, if it was 8 or 9 months.
It would seem that it would, because
it was a long process.
Things had to be approved, and you had to be there and getting people together and so forth.
It was like a very elaborate and complicated puzzle to see the different pieces on the floor of the foundry, especially the battle streamers and flags, and they had to. It had to be. They marked them so that they were able to put them back together again once they were all in pieces, and so that was a complicated problem. I'm glad that they're so competent there at the foundry. They did such a good job.
Well, certainly you're an artist, and an artist is always thinking about his or her next work. But it seems to me, after something like this, that's so important and so prominent, you're happy, I'm sure, when it's finished. But did you miss the process once it was finished, or were you?
I have.
Yes,
I have. I mean, I've moved on to many other large monuments. I'm doing a 50-foot piece now, and many things, and it's just, and sports figures, and sculptor Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus and a lot of other people. But this was special. There was a great group of people. It was certainly a wonderful opportunity to do something for the Air Force and to have it in Arlington National Cemetery. I mean,
absolutely.
Can you have a better location?
Yes.
I have been there, and I don't know if this happened while you were there, and I've actually heard taps, and I've heard gunshots, and from the cemetery.
Yes, I have too. And Zenos, on that note, I'm afraid I have to say goodbye. I'm so pleased to have had you here with us, and I look forward to seeing your future work. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. This is the Jacqueline Bachar Show, and I'll be right back. Hold on, please.